Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Kim Quillen with the Chicago Tribune. It's wonderful to be with you here this afternoon. I'm really looking forward to this conversation on supporting and empowering women in leadership. And I'm joined on this stage by an outstanding panel, 5 individuals who have very deep expertise and meaningful perspectives to share on this important topic. So I think it's going to be a great conversation. Can't wait for you to meet the team. So we're going to jump right into a round of introductions. Maybe starting with Lisa and working down. Could each of you introduce yourself? Tell us the role that you play at your company.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Jager with RHR International. I'm a partner at the firm and been there for 6 years. And we are a firm that are focused on leadership development and working with team effectiveness, helping leaders, CEOs, executives, high potential leaders to achieve their best. And we have a number of ways in which we do this, which, some of them is research related, and we'll talk a little bit more about, what we believe, what we think, and hopefully you get a little bit more sense of, the work that I do.
All right, thank you, Lisa.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tisha Danehl, and I'm with LHH. We are a global talent solutions firm that essentially supports organizations at every step of their talent journey. So whether it's from recruitment to development to upskill, reskill, as well as our career transition and mobility. I've been there for 25 years, pretty much have grown up there. But in my current role, I work within our different brands to ensure that we are continuing to partner and service our clients. So that's me.
My name's Jaclyn Trovato. I'm the Vice President of HR, the Chief Human Resources Officer for ComEd, your friendly neighborhood power company. So if you live in Chicago and your lights came on today, you're probably a customer, and we appreciate that so much. It's storm season. We're going to do our best to keep your lights on all summer long and your air conditioning functioning. I have been there just over 10 years between ComEd, which is the operating company, and then Exelon Corporate, which is the parent company that also owns several utilities in the Mid-Atlantic area of the country as well.
Hi, Christina Dietz. I'm a Vice President of Human Resources for Northwestern Medicine. So for those of you who are in the Chicagoland area, I probably don't need to explain. We're 11 hospitals, about 40,000 employees. So I don't need to explain what we do, I don't think. But I would say within my portfolio, I have HR business partners, labor relations, non-clinical learning and development, succession planning, and a few other odds and other duties as assigned.
That's great. Hi, everybody. I'm McCabe. I'm the Senior Vice President of People Success, or HR, at Ulta Beauty. So hopefully, if you're in Chicago or anywhere else, you have been to one of our stores and have had the experience that we're hoping to deliver to all of our customers. I've been at Ulta Beauty 11 years, so part of my duties as assigned are our diversity, equity, and inclusion team, talent acquisition, our change management team, internal comms, and then our talent and learning space. And it's just been a pleasure to be part of the Ulta Beauty team for this part of my career.
Well, great. Thank you. Thank you to each of you for being here. We have a lot to talk about today. Women make up 28% of C-suite roles, which is progress from a couple of decades ago, but still far from equal representation. I think a good place to begin our conversation today would be, I'd love to hear from each of you, just briefly, about what your companies are doing to encourage equal opportunities, to support women as they move into leadership ranks. Just a high-level overview would really help set the stage. Molly, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, as we prepped for this, I was sharing that my perspective likely might be slightly different in a positive way for this conversation, in that if we start with the notion that representation matters, we have a lot to celebrate at Ulta Beauty. So our overall workforce of nearly 60,000 associates is over 90% female. You might make that assumption because of how women largely feel about beauty. But within that, a couple other metrics to be proud of. One, our C-suite is almost 70% female. And we have a female CEO who has been part of that C-suite her whole time at Ulta Beauty, so almost 11 years. And she's an incredible representation of how we think about diversity, equity, inclusion overall. And so simply that is helping us and helping the women in our company see what they can be, and she certainly tells that story beautifully. Our board of directors is also incredibly diverse, again, over 60%, and then our director and above population is more than 60% female. But we try really hard not to take that for granted. So a lot has gone into that to get where we are. And we certainly don't stop there at, yes, those women are sitting in those roles and we turn the other way. We continue to think about how we're providing sponsorship, mentorship, support through intentional succession planning, talent reviews. And then I would say leveraging our women's BRG, which I'm sure many of you also have. We're relatively new on that part of our journey, but that's been a great community and part for the experience for our women.
So I thought I was going to be the only person that represents a number of women within an industry, but you really took it away from me. Healthcare is typically between 75 to 80% female. So inherently everything we do is really focused on women, just inherently. We are very deliberate in how we fill some of our key leadership positions. I think in over half of our hospitals right now, we have female presidents, and that was by design with our senior executive team. Our C-suite is, I think, 60% female as well and diverse. We have a number of programs that we have coming up on the horizon in our next fiscal year to grow women, and I would say most everybody, but specifically women who are in manager ranks right now, manager and director. We've done a lot to work to grow the vice presidents into presidents, but now we need to go down a couple layers so that we're really building our bench for 10 years from now, 5 years from now. So we're trying to be very deliberate about that and the programs we're creating for the future.
Surprisingly, I think for what a lot of people would consider in terms of a utility and a power company to be a male-dominated industry, we actually have 50% of our senior leadership team as women. 3 out of 5 of our board members are women, and as our entire executive population, we're at 48% female. And that's something that we're really proud of. And when I look at sort of the tenure of those women, many of us have over 20 and twice that amount of time in our discipline. And so this didn't come from 5 years ago, us deciding that we cared about diversity or that we cared about developing women. This is the result of decades and decades of workforce development, of our organization having determined years and years ago that there are not enough engineers to produce what is now the best, most reliable power grid in the country. And so we need to develop everyone to be in a position to do that. And we have, not just in the roles that you would consider traditionally to be female dominated, marketing or communications or human resources, of course, but in roles that we have really in the past not seen a lot of female representation. Our chief technology officer, heads of engineering, women who are commanding our field forces that have 4,000 men working for them who are climbing poles every day, who are listening to these women who incident command these storms. So we have women in all sorts of areas of leadership within our organization. And that is the result of us basically saying that it doesn't matter who you are or what you look like or the gender that you were assigned at birth. We need really strong engineers and we need really strong technologists in order to build this power grid. And so we are going to invest in that talent. And we've seen a lot of really powerful women rise to the top as a result of it.
Yep, that's great. So, it's interesting when you share that stat, and that I think the first thing you have to say is you have to be intentional about it. For us within our company, and even though we are, I'd say 45% women, one of the programs that has stuck out for me, specifically women in leadership, because I bet if we look at those numbers, they reduce. The program is called Engage, and we launched it 6 years ago, and it's specifically for women in leadership that wants to continue to move up. And it is a cohort of about 25 to 30. We pick it every year. And the curriculum is strategic thinking, negotiation, communication, and executive presence. So I was actually a member back in 2020, which with the pandemic, I didn't know how much I needed this, but about this program, in a year and a half, all the women that presented was promoted to the next one. And so I went from the role that I had 2 years ago to the current role that I'm in. So I think that is a program that really stands out for me.
That's great. That's really inspiring. And I'm here, wow. We are doing good in terms of being intentional, as you said. At RHR, we're at 44% women in senior leadership roles. And we have our first female CEO, and it's really exciting. We are very, very intentional about diversity, inclusion. We have a program on belonging that we launch, and we do research, and we also work with organizations and helping to diagnose and look at the culture. So for us, really looking at our products, our services that we design and we put together for our clients, it's with a critical eye and how we are looking at equality, equity, how we're looking at bias. We offer assessments, leadership assessments, and just the way in which we bring this perspective to organizations. We try to minimize and bring objective data and minimize any bias in decision making, and it's really, we take it really seriously in how we are looking at behaviors and factors that actually can minimize that and can increase success for women in leadership, for other marginalized communities, and for others who sometimes don't benefit from having the opportunities, didn't grow up with the opportunities to stand up. So how do we influence sponsorship programs? How do we influence and how we talk to HR leaders such as you, and looking at the culture, looking at your values, looking at your why of your organization, and is the why matching the how, which is the culture? So those are things that are really top of mind for us, and we do that internally too as a firm.
Thank you. That was a good way to start. It was great to hear about the landscape of work that's being done. I think it's important to note that today's panel discussion is particularly relevant given in the current political climate. Some companies are rolling back DEI programs and other programs that give preferential treatment to certain groups. So I'm really curious, what does this era mean for the advancement of women into leadership, and how are you navigating this period? Going to jump around a little bit. Tisha, would you like to start?
Sure. And I know for those of you that were here in the morning, right, Maria talked about how that landscape and dealing with the administrative changes has been top of mind. So specifically for our Engage program, right, it's exclusively for women. One of our core values is inclusion, and we're leaning into inclusion where we now have a cohort for men, and their focus is in allyship as well as servant leadership. So we're launching that this year, but we're also making sure that our women still have a safe space. So I think from what I hear, most companies are leading into that inclusion.
And certainly, you talked about values, and we had a town hall the other day, and this question came up, and it's been such a core value of ours that this question continues to come up because our employees are looking at the news, and then they're listening to the messages that they're getting internally, and they're waiting, right? Are they going to change? Are they going to edge away from their values? And so this question was asked at our town hall, and our general counsel and chief legal officer, a woman, started, and she said, "It is table stakes that we follow the law. We are a highly regulated business, and we do not get the pleasure of serving the vast Chicagoland community and all of our other service territories if we don't follow the law. But we are a values-driven organization, and one of our core values is that we succeed as a diverse and inclusive team. Those things are not mutually exclusive, and we have ways in order to do both of them." And so it's been difficult, right? You know, I was having a conversation with my team the other day, and they said, well, the executive orders came out in January. Why haven't we gotten this all figured out yet? Mm-hmm. You know, then we talked through, well, the legal challenges, and some of these things are going to go all the way up into the Supreme Court. And so we want to be really deliberate about the things that we do. But there's certain things we knew that we could do, and we knew that we could do them right away. And one of them you sort of reminded me of, which is we have always run STEM labs for young girls, right? I had said before, we identified long ago that if we do not get young women interested in STEM, we are not going to have the people to do the jobs that we need for them to do 20 years from now. But we started to see that that wasn't enough, and that also young boys were not interested in STEM as much as they used to be. And so we said, really easy way for us to sort of dip a toe into making sure that we have as much equity as possible. We're gonna run those same programs for young boys. And especially in disadvantaged communities and communities where the education system, something that is also in attack right now, are not getting the resources that they needed. That seems like a no-brainer, and it is fully in line with our values. And so as we look through all of our programs and what it is that we can keep and what it is that we are going to keep, but we are going to need to modify in ways that are compliant with the laws, we are taking an abundance mentality, we're taking an additive approach, and we're really proud of that.
Yep. Great.
So we serve two different populations, right? We serve our employees, physicians, volunteers, but we also serve our patient population. So one of the things that we've done is we've taken those two separate teams, so our Office of Diversity, DEI, and then our Office of Patient Equity, and we've tied them together. So now we have a department called Health Equity, and it's led by a very intelligent physician who focuses on how we tie the two programs together. Both at Northwestern Medicine and when I was at Lurie Children's, we always had the mantra that we as employees and physicians should look just as diverse as our patient population. That's just embedded in, I would say, the patchwork of the organization, and that's how we hire, that's how we promote for both. So now we've created these programs that we have diversity, equity, and inclusion, and employees want to know, what are we doing with them? We're not doing anything with them, because that's the way that we serve our patients and our employees and physicians, the way that we feel like we should. If you're in Chicago, you know our tagline is better. That's how we're better for people. We still have our affinity groups. I think we have 5 or 6 of them. Those aren't going anywhere. We have a high number of employees and physicians who participate in those, and that's what we want, because this helps us to better serve our employees as well as the communities that we serve.
Beautifully said by everyone, and a really similar journey for us at Ulta Beauty. So to answer the question, is it impacting how we're empowering or investing in women? No, because luckily it is embedded in who we are. We would use words like it's part of our DNA. It has been for the 35 years we've been in business. And luckily the beauty industry is really embedded in those same notions. So we can make an easy connection to the value of the work and the value of our business, which we've always done, and now is even more important. But any advice around that is, and you heard Jaclyn certainly mention it, we have been intentional about the right people we have to have at the table to be looking at the regulations, the executive orders, the laws, and making sure that we're making the best decisions for Ulta Beauty. So that includes people success, it includes legal, it includes our partners in public relations and marketing. And so we're even more intentional about that time together and taking the time to look at every key decision we're making and making sure that it fits within the framework of how we want to move forward.
Liza, I'm going to start the next question with you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Each of you works for a company that is already doing a good job of supporting women, but when you look out across industries and across types of businesses, there is this persistent underrepresentation of women in corporate leadership posts. What are some of the challenges and obstacles that are continuing to hold women back? Could you kick us off with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just bias is something that exists, and organizations need to be intentional. So it's more a systemic bias that I'm talking about. So how are your systems built? How is your rewarding programs built? How are you set up to really be intentional about rewarding efforts? And the other piece is, how are roles defined and what success looks like defined? Because sometimes it's just not available, the definition of what success looks like, and people get confused. What does it mean to be performing well in this organization, in this culture, in this space. And unfortunately, I think those are barriers. And I wouldn't say just for women, there are also men that are not qualifying to the standards of leadership that are defined out there. Not everybody, but certainly women tend to face more challenges with that. And I think those are simple things to solve for.
Right. Jaclyn, do you want to weigh in?
I think it's difficult to have a conversation about why sometimes women do not ascend as quickly or as high in the workplace without sort of calling out the elephant in the room, which is kind of the motherhood penalty. We talk about it as the broken rung oftentimes, but around the time often when professional women would start to ascend to leadership roles is also around the time that they become mothers. And how do we sort of solve for what is really a societal issue and really a worldwide issue within the four walls of our organization of how do we put everyone into the mindset that being a mother, that having responsibilities at home does not make someone a less impactful executive, a less impactful leader. And we've done that in a couple of ways, but one of the things that I think is so important that we've done, right, is that we've rolled out not only parental leave for the birthing parent, but also parental leave for the non-birthing parent, which is oftentimes the father, because when you start with a conversation that says that the woman's role is more important in parenting than the man's role is in parenting, you create sort of a standard from the very beginning that says that women are less valuable in the workplace because they will in fact have to take time off in order to be a parent. And we didn't get a lot of adoption right at first. You got a lot of guys being like, I can't step away for 5 weeks. No, no, I have responsibilities here. And like, so does that woman. And also she's, She's been carrying around this baby for 9 months and doing this job. But we've really seen, she's working real hard too. But we've really seen sort of with the generation that has come up that these men have started to take parenting more seriously and have considered it to be more their responsibility. And so as we sort of really decouple the conversation about parenthood being a mother's issue and more about it being an everyone's issue, I think we've brought a lot of equity to the workplace that we don't just market our childcare resources towards women. We don't just market our leave towards women. We don't just market our fertility treatment products towards women. Oftentimes that is the medical issue of the father in this situation. And so just being really deliberate about saying like, parents are parents, and we are going to meet the needs of all of them so that everyone can ascend because we need all types of people in leadership levels, I think has been really impactful. And as that has happened, you've sort of opened up the conversation. You have executive women saying, I got to run out for 2 hours to have an IVF treatment. You have executive men saying, I leave at 4 because I coach my kids' baseball team, and sort of taking away the what is a woman's issue versus what is a man's issue, because putting a roof over your kid's head is parenting too. And if we can sort of alleviate that guilt and put that load on both sets of parents, I think that we take some pressure off of women.
Good point. Tisha, before we move on, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I love that. And I think having some of the programs that I've seen to help, it is that when we become a parent, right? When now you have competing challenges, there's actually one that I love. It's phone a friend. And the guilty, right, of as a parent leaving your child to go work or do something. And sometimes it is right after they're born, and sometimes it's a year or two. And so they had a program when you're so frustrated, and I'm sure that's probably when I cried the most, was when I just was a new mom and trying to juggle everything 5 days a week, right? And you called someone, and there was the sponsor was like, you're gonna get through this. You're not always going to feel like this. And you know what? I got over it. It got better. So I think the awareness is really helpful, and to help people through it, because it's part of life. Yeah,
exactly. Moving on to the next question, I'm going to start, Molly, with you, if that's okay.
Sure.
What are some of the best practices for using deliberate long-term processes to develop female leaders? I'm thinking about things like succession planning, talent reviews. Any best practices for implementing these types of processes?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, like many of you, we've been on a journey with that and have, I think, a lot to be proud of, starting with a few things. One, I would say I mentioned earlier the data. So as we're looking at benches for key roles across our business, we are looking at the diversity of those benches through a number of different lenses. Gender is certainly one of them, but we're also pairing those discussions with the more lived experiences side of that equation. So what do the leadership behaviors look like? How has this leader shown up in moments that matter? And so making sure that those two parts of the conversation are always present, not only in the talent review discussions we're having at the highest level of our organization, but as that process trickles through to the lower levels. And then also training our business partners to be prepping leaders and in the moment running the session with a lens on equity within the discussion. So empowering them to be on the lookout for language that is biased and not welcome in the discussion. Certainly part of that is more specific to women if we start talking about motherhood or their obligations outside of the workplace. And so I'm proud that we don't have too much of that happening, but we certainly are prepping our teams to make sure we're setting the right standard of the type of equity we want to have in those discussions.
Christina?
Sure. So we have a few different programs that some we have in flight, some we're working on for the next fiscal year. Our first one is our mentoring program. I think 80% of the representation in that program are women. And we've encouraged those mentors to create, I'll say, a safe space to give feedback and for the mentee to receive the feedback. For any of you who have been recipients of mentorship, you know that's one of the most important pieces, right? Because I can say some of the most important things I learned from my mentors were soft skills, things people don't talk about, and that you quietly just learn from other executives. We also have a leadership coaching program that we just started about a month ago, and we specifically identified people throughout the organization. Again, it's about 85% women representation who we feel can be strong leaders within the organization. And we're starting at the manager level, but we're really focusing on the director level because we want the directors to help educate their managers as they go through the program. So we feel like we could touch more people that way. And we are newly working on succession planning and are kind of stepping away from the one-to-one succession planning, that, you know, naming who the successor will be, but keeping it open. And I think that's how we have at least half of our hospitals with female presidents right now, because we're creating talent pools of people who at any point can say, you know what, I'm going to take a pass right now because I have young kids, or, you know, my husband's traveling, I don't want to be involved, or people can step up and say, I would like to be considered in the talent pool. So not so much one-to-one, but group training, and also giving them opportunities across our health system. So not just focused on one hospital, but large strategic projects that touch all of our hospitals.
Jaclyn, I'm going to change it up a little bit if you don't mind. You know, when it comes to helping women advance, there are these long-term processes and programs, but there's also a very important cultural aspect. How do you create a culture that truly champions women?
You know, culture is always sort of tone at the top, right? And when you have women in these leadership roles who are living our values, which is that you bring your whole self to work, I think you get that really direct sort of, if you can see it, you believe that you can be it. And, you know, a very, very high level woman at our company told me a couple of years ago, she said, she's pregnant with her third kid, and she said, all the other executives only have 2 or less. I think that might be the limit. I think the third kid is the one that's going to do me in. And I didn't have any kids at this point in time, and so I have no idea where I got the courage to be like, no, you have to have the third kid, and you have to continue to lean in so that the rest of us
and also too late
do it. Yeah. And also, they're so expensive. You can't do this job. But, you know, as you get more women ascending to the top and just sort of openly talking about, like, this is what my life is. This is how I juggle it. This is how I do it. I do think that that culture just sort of permeates throughout the organization. But we also have ways where we've been extremely intentional about it. I think you had mentioned the affinity groups that you guys have. We call them employee resource groups, but they function much in the same way. One of them, which is a very cute name, is called MomEd, right? At ComEd, right? And they are not shy at all about giving me feedback, about saying, hey, we have this policy or a process that isn't meeting our needs. Hey, bereavement doesn't cover a miscarriage, and like, why not? Yeah. And like, yeah, why not? That's an easy thing to do. It is not a very expensive thing to do. It took me an hour and a quick conversation with a member of our board in order to change a policy on it. And when you do stuff like that, every once in a while when you have to say, no, we can't, or like it doesn't make sense or it's cost prohibitive, they trust you. Because the 5 other times when you could do it and it was low-hanging fruit, you took the banner for them. And so I think just really listening to your employees and saying like, what do you need and how can we help? And we can't do everything, but when we can, we're gonna endeavor to do it. I do think that you empower a culture where they then are gonna raise their hand and say, hey, this is what I need. And you might not lose that high potential woman who's like, this isn't working for me. They might say, hey, this is what I need for it to work for me.
Very good. Liza?
Yeah, sure. I brought some stats here. I was looking, and I'll share that later. But I think when you talk about culture, right? This idea of really investing in a culture where there is belonging, there is trust, there is psychological safety, it will help not only women but all the employees. And I think that is a goal that we have when we work with organizations to really look at statistics and look at the deep causes that might be, it may be systemic issues, it may be decision making that is not being attributed to women. And so beyond the programs, how are we looking also the systemic, the systems that we're building around everything that helps, us to challenge and ask, why are women not getting promotions? Why are we not having retention? Why are we having retention issues? So looking at those numbers, in addition to all the really powerful mentorship programs, and really thinking about sponsorship, how do we establish that? I love that you brought up allyship, which is something that goes beyond sponsorship, that it's actually putting your power that you have as an executive in the line to really give an opportunity for somebody in a role. And so those things that, in addition to programs, are really, I think, are a must for us in organizations. And you are, in HR, you have the power to do and to ask those questions, in addition to the wonderful programs that are there to support and really make sure that we are looking and watching for intentional bias, systemic bias in your culture as well.
Tisha, could you talk about the role of keeping stats when it comes to supporting women and helping them advance?
Sure, and I think you heard us all, we all know our stats, right, at the gender parity level, but I think more importantly is also looking at it through leadership, right? So looking at the different levels within your organization. At the very least, where are you starting off? I think most companies a few years ago, when you looked at your stats, you were shocked, right? I think we started at our board, executive level, was 7% women, and I believe now we're up to 33%. So I think that is important. But we are seeing, instead of having targets now, we're just looking at overall improvement. We're looking more at the engagement surveys and well-being, as well as inclusion. So I think there is a change in that. So love to hear if that's something that you guys have changed too.
We're such a metrics-driven organization, right? I could show you a key KPI book that's this big, and every year someone delivers it to my desk, and every year I'm like, again, what am I going to do with this book that's this size? But we have this belief, right, that you can only improve on things that you measure, and how are you going to know how well you are doing? And so we continue to maintain those statistics. We continue to look at them. We continue to monitor the health of our business. And we also continue to keep an eye out for what are the best practices, right? The reality of where are the use of the statistics being challenged legally, and how do we use our data to our advantage, but also use our data to keep us safe as an organization. And I think that is just, sort of the common sense approach right now to making sure that you are maintaining all of these amazing things that you're building, and that also you're putting a little bit of armor and fortress around your company so you can continue to do those things.
Yeah. I'd like to talk for a minute about mentorship. And Christina, you've mentioned that you've had a couple of strong mentors in your career, so I'm hoping you can kind of lead us off here. Research suggests that women are less likely to have mentors, even though mentorship has been shown to really help them. Can you take us inside the relationships that you've had, the mentor-mentee relationships, and just tell us what specifically, how it works and what makes those relationships successful?
My mentorship started, let's say it was a long time ago. And it was very informal. It wasn't necessarily that someone said to me, I would like to mentor you. It was actually my CHRO at different organizations. And I could see that the dynamic between us had changed. I would have my review, my performance appraisal. That was how astute you are at your job. Are you fulfilling all your job duties? But then she would start sharing other things with me. You have a seat at the table now. Why aren't we hearing your voice? Are you watching the relationships in the room? Are you seeing who are allies with each other in the room? Are you seeing who maybe are definitely not allies? Yeah. Are you maybe building a grassroots effort outside of the meeting when you're coming in to present your topic, so you already know who's going to be behind you? So they both started to teach me, I would say again, the softer skills that your supervisor isn't going to necessarily tell you in your review, because that would be awkward. And I think that's often why mentors are not your supervisor. And I would say that one of my mentors was an African-American woman, and she and I had very, very good conversations about disparity between our roles based on what we look like. And it was a way for us and me to learn how to handle myself moving forward. I mean, I remember specifically one conversation we were having with a consultant who didn't know us, and he kept looking at me as though I was the CHRO. She handled it like a pro. I was shrinking because I was so uncomfortable. And we had a conversation about it afterwards, and I learned from it. And now I know how to be better moving forward. So I think it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. And then I've had the opportunity in my career to informally mentor people as well. And you kind of just want to pay it forward once you're the gift of it.
Molly?
Yeah, what a great question and great examples. Yeah, similar, and I've had a gift in my career of when I was at a director level, someone very senior to me, who just wasn't caught up in the hierarchy of titles to say, okay, this is someone who has skills that I could use in the job that I'm doing now and can continue to nurture. And she was the CEO at the time and then became the CEO at Ulta Beauty. And so that was life-changing for me, that she saw potential in me and she invested the time in me. And it gave me confidence I never, ever would have achieved at that stage in my career. And so I've tried to take from that, everything that I can, and much of it is what you described, just around taking the time. She would take the time to teach me things, to give me feedback, to come out of a meeting and say, this is something I observed. And then I've had the gift of my current supervisor, our CHRO, I would say is the same. Is she, when I first started at Ulta Beauty, and she was not my direct boss, just took the time to teach me things, and she still does that today. We had a conversation this morning that I know she's being intentional about, we haven't talked about this, say, before, and I'm gonna take the time to have that conversation with you. So both of those women have been really instrumental in my life and given me things to think about as I can pay that forward.
I'd like to segue into a related topic, and that's sponsorships. And Liza, I believe you alluded to this earlier. Can you talk a little bit about what sponsors are compared to mentorships? Yes. I mean, both are very key parts of development and succession planning.
Yes, I'm so passionate about sponsorship. I think it matters so much, especially for the topic and developing women. Like I said, both are really, really important. A mentor will be a person, you gave really good examples, will be the person teaching you, will be the person oriented, guiding you. And sometimes not, it may not be a person who is in the position to use their social capital or, power, leadership power, to really ask the questions about why are you not promoting this person? Why is this happening? Or vouch for you. So there is a little bit of a difference there. I would say the sponsor can be also a mentor, but also uses a little bit more, has more influence and really caring or vouching for a person, which can make a whole difference in their career. So I think is really important. And as you think about the leadership development programs, it's a really great addition when you identify people who can have mentors and both sponsors in the organization. I had wonderful mentors and sponsors in my career, and I would say one characteristic that I find that is really powerful for both is level of curiosity, because I think the best ones are the ones that are also wanting to know what is relevant for you, what you are about. It's not about only teaching you, it's about also learning a little bit from you. Those have been the best ones I've seen in my life, and I think regardless if that's evident or not, if it's more of a teaching relationship or a mentorship, I think there is a lot to learn from and a lot to love that you got a feedback. And it's amazing when you have somebody who can actually observe you in action and share in-time feedback and help you to see in that environment what success might look like, right? Which may be so different in a different organization. I don't know if we have room to talk a little bit about the allyship. I think I mentioned, that's another level of, and we hear more and more in organizations, and that it's a step above. Ally can be a mentor, can be a sponsor, but it's also somebody who is actually giving you that opportunity, who is moving, creating a role for you, giving you the chance, and really be more hands-on, coaching you all the way. And having that opportunity in organizations, having organizations that are so curious about this program, allyship program, because it is also an opportunity to shape the talent of an organization and really be, I know you noticed that I'm a little bit passionate about systems, and to really look at the systems, and influence and really grab the talent that organization needs. It's really important to have diverse talent.
I'm curious, and I know time is drawing short, but I'm curious about generational differences in women's leadership. Do younger generations have different needs, and how can we support the advancement of women across generations? Tisha, would you like to?
Sure. Well, I think if you think about it, right, what you needed at 20, 30, 40,
Yeah.
and 50 are vastly different. And I think, again, just recognizing, being aware what they're going through. And second, I think we talked about it, is just paying it forward, right? And recognizing, wow, someone earlier in their career, they're struggling right now. There's a great example that I was listening into a talk. She worked in Washington, so a lot of the meetings were tenuous and just very emotional, you can imagine. And she would see women earlier in their career, they would get talked over all the time. So what she would do is she would say, excuse me, she's like, Jaclyn was trying to say something, so after she got talked over, and she was like, I'm gonna do that in every meeting. Right? So I challenge all of us, that's something simple and actionable to recognize, right? And then have immediate action, and you're helping someone with their voice. We all go through the imposter syndrome, especially as you're going to maybe later 20s and 30s. So helping women through that and being more confident in leadership, I think is important. So women supporting women.
Yeah, very good. I'd like to end with a speed round, and we're going to start, Molly, with you. Just like maybe 10 seconds or less. What's one step that a corporate manager or leader, perhaps someone in the audience today, can take to empower female leaders and support their long-term success? Molly?
Yeah, thank you. I would offer two things, but not longer. Give credit where it's due, all across the board, but When people are doing good work, make sure you're giving that credit, and to say people's names in rooms that you are in, to pay it forward. That is so powerful. If someone can't be at the table with you, you saying, do you know this person? She did this great work, and you should know this person. I've literally said this many times. You should know this person. Make those connections where you can.
Give them confidence and encourage them to have a voice. If you're going into a meeting with someone who maybe you want people to recognize similarly, talk with them in advance of the meeting, a couple points that maybe they want to present in that meeting. Set them up so that they have one win in that meeting, and be very intentional about it with them.
Agree with both of those, and I would add listening and not sort of assuming that what you needed at a certain stage in your career or what you wanted out of your career aspirations is what everyone wants, and really helping to tailor solutions that respect that all of our employees are individuals and that they have specific needs. And just if you listen and if you are open-minded, people will tell you.
Yep. I'd say be courageous in giving feedback, right? Feedback is a gift, as sometimes we might not know it right there as we are getting it. But I'll go back to earlier, right? Let's start being kind versus being nice, because we know if that is really helping that person.
You stole my advice. I was going to feedback. But I think it's really important, and I'll double down on the feedback because, and both from yourself, if you do have the opportunity to give feedback. It is a gift, and challenge your organization to have better ways to give feedback. I think so many people just don't know what they could be better in, and I think managers sometimes do not have the training or the ability to have those conversations that are productive. So investing in having people who are prepared to give feedback and making sure that is happening, it really can go a long way for somebody to develop. And I will plug again for allyship. If there is a way for you to become an ally for somebody, we are seeing numbers, going back and forth. There is a little bit of a trajectory of investment in programs that are related to diversity and inclusion, but it continues to happen, right? I think in organizations people are changing the names, but the work is still continues to happen. So how can you contribute to that yourself? How can you infuse ways in your practice and how you're doing work in your organization to support that? And feedback is really an important one.
Thank you. Thank you to our audience, and thank you to our panelists. Liza, Tisha, Jaclyn, Christina, and Molly, thank you. Great conversation.
Thank you.